I was 17 when I first felt the call. It was not a sudden, thunderous revelation, but rather a quiet whisper that settled into my heart and refused to leave. At the time, I did not fully understand it, only that there was a longing in me, a desire to give my life to something greater, to someone greater. I remember the day I told my family. My mother's eyes welled with tears, though she tried to smile. My father, a man of few words, simply nodded, his expression unreadable. My siblings, still young, did not understand what it meant for me to leave. But I knew. Stepping through the gates of the convent meant leaving behind the world I had known, the laughter of home, the warmth of familiar places, the possibility of a different future. And yet, I never doubted my choice. Life in the convent was not easy, but it was full. The early mornings, the quiet prayers before dawn, the hours spent in study and reflection, all of it shaped me. I learned to find joy in the simplicity of daily tasks, washing dishes, tending the gardens, preparing meals for the poor. In each act of service, I saw the face of Christ. There were moments of struggle, of course, times when the silence felt too heavy, when the discipline of obedience tested my patience, when doubts whispered in the stillness of the night. Had I truly been called? Was I strong enough to live this life? Would I miss the things I had left behind? But every time those questions arose, I returned to the one who had called me. In the hush of the chapel and the flickering candlelight, I found my answer, not in certainty, but in surrender. I had not chosen this life for comfort, nor for recognition. I had chosen it for love. And love, true divine love, demands everything. It asks us to let go of our own desires, our own plans, and trust in something far greater. It is not always easy, but it is always enough. Now, years later, as I stand in the same chapel where I first took my vows, I do not regret a single moment. The world outside may have changed, but the one who called me remains the same. And as long as he is with me, I know that I am exactly where I am meant to be. There are moments in life when time seems to slow, when the air itself feels charged with something beyond the ordinary. I had read about such moments in the lives of saints, but I never imagined I would experience one myself. And yet, on that quiet evening, something within me shifted forever. It was a Sunday just after evening prayers. The chapel was empty except for the soft glow of candlelight flickering along the stained glass windows. I had lingered behind, needing a moment alone with God. The weight of my vocation, the quiet sacrifices, the discipline of obedience, all of it had been pressing on me in ways I had not expected. I knelt before the altar, hands folded, my lips moving in a silent prayer. I wasn't asking for anything specific, just seeking, yearning for reassurance. Was I truly walking the path God had intended for me? Did He see me, hear me, even in my moments of doubt? Then it happened. A stillness fell over the room, deeper than silence, as if the world outside had faded away. The air felt different, charged, alive, and in that moment, I was no longer alone. I did not see a vision. I did not hear an audible voice, but I felt it. A presence, immense and overwhelming, yet infinitely gentle. It was as if love itself had filled the space around me, pressing against my skin, wrapping itself around my soul. Tears filled my eyes before I even realized I was crying. It was not sadness, nor fear, but something else, something too vast to name. My heart ached, but not from pain. It was as if something within me had been unlocked, as if a door I never knew existed had been thrown wide open. In that moment, I understood. I had always believed in God, had dedicated my life to Him, had sought Him in my prayers and in my service. But now, for the first time, I knew Him, not as an idea, not as a distant figure in Scripture, but as someone real, someone close. I do not know how long I knelt there, bathed in that presence. Time had lost its meaning. But when I finally rose, something inside me had changed. The doubts that had once plagued me, the questions I had wrestled with, no longer held the same weight. I had been seen, I had been known, and I had been loved. From that moment on, I could no longer serve out of duty alone. My vows, my prayers, my every act of service, they were no longer obligations, but offerings of love. That night, as I lay in my small cell, staring at the ceiling in the dim candlelight, I whispered a simple prayer, not out of habit, but out of certainty. I am yours, Lord. There are no words in any language that can fully capture what it means to stand in the presence of the divine. It is something that must be felt, lived, experienced in the depths of one's soul. And yet I will try, because that moment was not just a fleeting feeling, not just an impression on my heart. It was real. It was more real than anything I had ever known. It was an evening like many others. The chapel was dimly lit, the flickering glow of candlelight casting long, gentle shadows across the worn wooden pews. The scent of melting wax, old wood, and the faint traces of incense from the morning prayers still lingered in the air. This place had always been a refuge for me, a sanctuary where the weight of the world seemed to lessen, where my heart could be still. I had spent years in prayer, in service, in devotion, and yet despite all that I had given, all that I had sacrificed, there remained a whisper of doubt deep within me, a restlessness, a longing for something I could not name. That night, I knelt before the altar, my hands clasped tightly together, my forehead bowed low. The words of my prayer came softly, little more than a breath against the silence. Lord, are you truly here? I had prayed this prayer many times before, in moments of uncertainty, in moments when the burden of faith felt too heavy to carry. But something about this night was different. At first there was nothing, just the steady rhythm of my own breathing, the quiet creaks of the old chapel settling in the cool of the evening. But then everything changed. The air grew thick, almost tangible, as though the very space around me had shifted. It was not frightening, nor was it dramatic. There was no booming voice, no blinding light, only a presence, so vast, so overwhelming, that it made every hair on my body stand on end. A warmth spread through me, deeper than anything I had ever known. It was not the warmth of fire or of touch, but something that seeped into the very marrow of my bones. I felt it filling every part of me, wrapping around me like an embrace so tender, so powerful, that I could do nothing but surrender to it. And then, in an instant, I knew I was not alone. God had always been there. I had known it in my mind, had believed it in my heart, but this was different. This was not faith. This was presence, a nearness so undeniable, so profoundly real, that for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly seen. Every fear, every failure, every moment of doubt, I felt it all laid bare before Him, and yet there was no shame, no condemnation, only love. A love so vast, so consuming, that it filled the very air I breathed. I began to weep, though I was not sad. The tears came from something deeper, something beyond emotion. I pressed my forehead to the cold stone floor, unable to stand beneath the weight of it all. I am yours, Lord. I always have been. I do not know how long I remained there. Time itself seemed to dissolve, lost in the stillness of that moment. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. It did not matter. When at last the presence began to fade, when the air around me returned to its quiet hum, I felt something within me had changed. No, I had changed. The encounter did not erase my struggles. It did not answer every question or remove every hardship. But it did something far greater. It made me whole. Because once you have met the divine, once you have been touched by a love that defies words, there is no turning back. I had always believed that God spoke in whispers, in the quiet stirrings of the heart, in the gentle nudges of the soul. Never had I imagined that He would choose to reveal Himself in a way so powerful, so terrifying, that it would shake me to my core. The visions began without warning. It was late at night, and I was alone in my small room within the convent. The others had retired for the evening, the halls were silent, and the only light came from the small candle burning near my bedside. I had just finished my prayers and was about to lay down when a sudden, overwhelming dizziness overtook me. I grasped the edge of my wooden desk to steady myself, but the world around me had already begun to shift. The room seemed to blur, the candlelight twisting into strange patterns before my eyes. My heart pounded, my breathing grew shallow, and then I was no longer in my room. A vision unfolded before me, more vivid than any dream, more real than anything I had ever experienced. I saw a great city, its streets lined with towering buildings, its people moving in hurried waves. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The sky above was dark, swirling with unnatural clouds, and the air was thick with the sound of weeping. Then suddenly, the earth trembled. Cracks spread like veins across the streets, swallowing entire sections of the city whole. Fires erupted, and the cries of anguish filled the air. I tried to turn away, to shut my eyes, but the vision held me captive. Then, amid the chaos, I saw him. A figure stood at the center of the destruction. Radiant, unshaken, sovereign. His presence was undeniable, his gaze piercing. Though his face was veiled in light, I knew who he was. The Son of Man. His hands were outstretched, not in wrath, but in sorrow, in love. And then he spoke. My people have turned away. They have built their towers on sand, placed their trust in what will not last. They have closed their ears to my voice, hardened their hearts to my call. But I am still here. The ground shook again. The vision shifted. I saw fields of golden wheat bending under a gentle wind, a river running clear and strong. People knelt in prayer, their faces lifted toward the sky, their hands reaching towards something unseen, yet deeply felt. A great peace covered them like a shelter. Those who seek me will find me. Those who call upon my name will not be forsaken. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. I gasped, finding myself back in my room, the candle still flickering beside me. My hands trembled, my body was drenched in sweat. What had I just witnessed? For hours I sat in silence, trying to comprehend what had been shown to me. The destruction, the sorrow, the calling to return. It was both a warning and a promise, a call to repentance, but also a call to hope. I knew without a doubt that this vision was not meant for me alone. It was something I would have to share. But how could I explain it? Who would believe me? And yet, deep in my heart, I knew. I had been given this vision for a reason. I had been shown something that I could not ignore. The world was on the brink of something great, something terrible, something divine. And I was being called to bear witness. From the moment of my vision, my life was no longer my own. The weight of what I had seen pressed upon me, filling my waking hours with urgency and my nights with restless prayer. The message was clear. The world stood at the edge of something monumental, something divine. But who would listen? Who would believe? I struggled with doubt. Was it truly my place to speak of such things? Would I be dismissed as delusional as so many visionaries before me had been? Yet, even as doubt whispered in my mind, a greater certainty grew within me. God had shown me these things for a reason, and I could not remain silent. The warning. The days that followed were filled with signs, strange occurrences that only deepened my conviction. A woman came to the convent, desperate, eyes filled with unspeakable sorrow. She had lost everything, her home, her family, her faith. As she spoke, I felt an unshakable pull, as though I had already seen her suffering before. And then I remembered. The weeping in my vision, the cries of anguish, it was the same. I took her hands in mine, and before I could think, the words spilled from my lips. Do not be afraid, he is calling you back. This is not the end. She gasped, eyes widening in shock. How did you know? She whispered. I had no answer, only the certainty that I was meant to deliver those words. More signs followed. A storm unlike any we had seen before, turning the sky an eerie shade of crimson as it rolled over the city. The news spoke of disasters, unrest, turmoil in the world. I heard whispers of war, of leaders crumbling, of people searching desperately for meaning. The vision had been real, and time was running out. The call to return. One night, I knelt alone in the chapel, begging for guidance. Lord, what must I do? And then I heard him again, not in fire or thunder, but in the stillness of my heart. Go back to them, tell them what you have seen, call them home. No trembling breath escaped me. Go back, to the world outside the convent, to the people I had once left behind. I had spent my life in devotion, believing I had found my place within these sacred walls. But now I understood. My place was not here. Not anymore. With the dawn, I made my decision. The other sisters watched in silence as I packed my few belongings. Some tried to dissuade me, some wept, but none of them truly understood. This was not abandonment. This was obedience. As I stepped through the gates, the city stretched before me, vast and overwhelming. I was no longer Sister Catherine of the convent. I was a messenger, and I carried with me the final warning. A warning of judgment, yes, but also of mercy. A call to return, for the time was near. The moment I stepped beyond the convent walls, I felt the weight of the world settle upon my shoulders. The air outside was thick with noise, sirens wailing in the distance, hurried footsteps on cracked sidewalks, voices rising in anger and despair. It was a world unraveling at the seams, just as I had seen in my vision. I had been sheltered for so long, tucked away in the quiet sanctuary of faith. The convent had been my refuge, a place where silence was sacred and prayers filled the air like whispered hymns. But faith, I realize now, was not meant to remain hidden behind stone walls and candlelight. It was meant to be carried into the heart of the storm. And so I began to speak. The first rejection. At first, I sought those who knew me, family, old friends from my past life before I became a nun. I thought they would listen. I thought they would see the urgency in my eyes, hear the conviction in my voice, and believe. I was wrong. Catherine, you've been isolated for too long, my cousin said gently, as if my faith had made me fragile. Visions? You sound like one of those doomsday fanatics, another relative scoffed. You need rest, maybe even help. Their concern was laced with pity, but beneath it, I sensed something sharper. Fear. Fear of what my words might mean if they were true. Fear of the responsibility truth demands. It is easier to dismiss a messenger than to face the message itself. Even among those who had once shared my faith, I found resistance. Priests, scholars, theologians, many of them looked at me with skepticism, their expressions unreadable behind their clerical robes. God does not reveal such things in this way anymore, one priest told me, shaking his head. Be careful, sister. There are many spirits in this world, and not all of them are divine, another warned. I did not argue. I could not. What words could I offer that would break through their doubt? The public backlash. When my message spread beyond private conversations, the reaction grew more severe. I spoke in churches, on street corners, anywhere that would allow me, and for every soul that listened with a spark of hope, there were 10 who scoffed. I was called a liar, a heretic, a lunatic. Some accused me of seeking attention, others of trying to manipulate the weak-minded. She claims to have heard God, but where is her proof? Reporters demanded. Another deluded woman looking for followers, skeptics sneered. If her vision is real, let her show us a miracle. The media twisted my story, turning me into a spectacle. They painted me as either a dangerous radical or an unstable woman in need of psychiatric care. Even those who believed in God found it easier to believe that he had chosen someone else to speak through, someone more educated, more powerful, more like them. One night, as I left a small gathering where I had shared my vision, a man stepped from the shadows. His posture was rigid, his voice cold. Stop talking. It was not a plea, it was a warning. I realized then that my words had begun to stir something deeper, something that did not want the truth to be spoken. The personal cost. I lost everything. The church distanced itself from me. My former sisters in the convent, though still bound to me in faith, could not publicly support me. My name became a cautionary tale, whispered among those who wished to keep their reputations intact. I could not return to the life I had once known, and I had no home in this new world. There were nights when I questioned everything. Had I misunderstood? Had I truly heard the voice of God, or had it been my own mind desperate for meaning? Had I ruined my life for nothing? But then, in those moments of doubt, something would happen. A stranger would approach me with tears in their eyes, saying my words had awakened something in them. A child would grasp my hand and whisper, "I believe you." Small signs, small mercies, enough to keep me going. The true cost. The truth is not free, it demands everything. I lost my place in the world, my security, my reputation. I gained the scorn of many and the fear of more. But I had also gained something else. Purpose. I knew now that the truth would never be easy, it would never be comfortable, but it was worth it. Because even if the whole world turned away, I would not, for I had seen what was coming, and I could not be silent. The road ahead is uncertain, but one truth remains unshaken. I cannot turn back. Everything I once knew has crumbled away. The safety of the convent, the acceptance of my peers, the life I had carefully built within the embrace of faith. Yet, in the wreckage of my old existence, I have found something far greater, a calling that burns brighter than fear, louder than doubt. I was not chosen for comfort. I was not given this vision to remain silent. Though the world has cast me aside, though my name is whispered with ridicule and suspicion, I know that there are those who listen. I see it in the eyes of the few who dare to believe, in the quiet confessions of strangers who tell me they too have felt something stirring, an unease, a warning, a silent voice urging them to prepare. It is for them that I continue. I no longer stand in the warmth of the convent walls, but I have found a different kind of sanctuary. In the streets, in the hearts of those who still seek truth, in the quiet spaces where faith refuses to die. My mission is no longer confined to whispered prayers in candlelit chapels. It moves with me, carried on the wind, scattered in every conversation, in every step I take toward the unknown. There are forces that wish to silence me. I know this now. I have seen their shadows, heard their warnings. The closer I come to the heart of the truth, the stronger the resistance grows. But I am no longer afraid. I have nothing left to lose except my faith. In that I will never surrender. So, I go forward, not knowing where this path will lead. I speak, not knowing who will listen. I warn, even as the world turns its back. Because the vision remains. The storm is coming, and my mission is far from over.